And with me is Renat Verbruggen, and we're going to talk to you today about the MSc in FinTech and Technology Innovation. First of all, sorry about my voice. Hopefully it'll get better and not much worse through this. Okay, so first of all, let's talk first about DCU, give you some stats, and to make you feel a little bit better about the actual that we are who we say we are. It's ranked in the top 2% of universities worldwide, but we're 19th in graduate employment rate. And we've got one of the world's youngest leading universities, and in the top 100 for social and economic impact. So that's something that's obviously important here. So why have a new master's? We believe that a rise in financial technologies, or FinTech as we call it, is opening up a whole host of new possibilities, but also challenges, business and organizational challenges for established players in the financial sector. And the key contributors of this greatly increased speed of change in the last decade are primarily in technology and financial services, and the relationship, the symbiotic relationship that they have with each other. But also, you can't neglect the whole aspect of customer preferences and how that has driven it through iPhone and so on like that, developments there, but also the development, the increase and then the decrease, the stripping of financial regulation that has happened after the global financial crisis. So the financial ecosystem has grown significantly and now encompasses a whole load of innovative FinTech startups. And these work against, but also alongside existing financial institutions. And just to give you a little bit of context here, Enterprise Ireland, Ernst & Young have estimated that about 7,000 work in FinTech in Ireland currently. And making allowances for COVID and so on, we would imagine that that is going to grow to 10,000 by the year end of this year, and maybe by the end of next year if it hasn't got to that stage. So, Renat, can you talk about this?
Of course. Okay. So, hello everyone. So, I'm the director of the overall MSc program, and we have majors in a number of different areas of computing already. I won't bore you with them all, but they include AI and data analytics and secure software engineering. So the FinTech and Technology Innovation will fit into that overall MSc model, if you like, as a major. So the way we structure a part-time MSc is over 2 years, okay? And that allows us to have 2 meetings per week, normally from 4 o'clock till 7 o'clock. These were in the face-to-face days, across 4 semesters. And then there's a final semester, what we used to call summer, dedicated to a practicum. And I'll explain what the practicum is in a few minutes. So in other words, it would mean that in year 1, in the first semester, you've got 2 modules, 12 weeks, followed by exams in January. Year 1, semester 2, same thing, 2 modules per week for 12 weeks, followed by exams in May. Then summer off, then you're back into the second year, semester 1, same structure, 2 modules per week. But then what we do as part of the 2 modules per week, there's also a section on what we call Practicum Design, okay? Putting it simply, the practicum, which I'll talk in more detail about in a minute, is the research part of your MSc. So all of the modules are taught, so it's a taught MSc, but there's also a section where you do research in a particular area within financial technology and innovation, okay? So that's what we call a practicum. We call it a practicum rather than a thesis because we've borrowed the term from MIT. And the end result is not 150 pages, 120 of which are background, but rather we're interested in the 30 pages that you do yourself. So we actually have got that down to a research paper that you write in and around 15 pages. So after that semester where you're designing the practicum, in the second semester you have 2 more modules, and then you develop the practicum itself and then deliver it, present it to us. Okay, so that's the overall structure. And that is the same structure as we have quite successfully run since the 80s for the MSc. Now, so where would a graduate from this go? Well, because it is new, you will end up being in roles that are new. So you'll be in the data analyst's role, the data scientist role, even software developers, IT system architects, data architects, but within the financial area, okay? So some of them will be small startup fintechs, but also, as Martin alluded to earlier on, some of them will be with the big financial hitters who are setting up their own fintech areas within their corporations. So Martin, do you want to move on?
So yes, thanks very much. So the degree structure that goes across those 4 taught semesters really looks like this. You could look upon it as 3 strands, if you like. The top in red there gives 3 modules which essentially speak to the introductory or underpinning for the degree. First of all, to look at the data aspects, the data privacy, data governance, and to prepare for the practicum there. FinTech Financial Innovation, as we'll see, gives a broad overview of the FinTech space, particularly looking at aspects of blockchain. And in the intermediate modules in blue there, you'll see that thread, if you like, on blockchain as a key enabling technology that is taken further, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. There's also an introductory underpinning module on statistical data analysis, because statistical data analysis, knowledge of statistics, is essential in the whole area of FinTech. Finally, in the intermediate section, we'll be looking at high-tech innovation and entrepreneurship for FinTech, and we'll look at that in a minute as well. But that basically comes at the beginning of second year, and it is also sets you up, works in parallel with the whole aspect of the Practicum Design module. In terms of the advanced modules that you see in orange on the bottom, machine learning, data analytics and data mining are the technological, they follow on from the statistical data analysis. They use that underpinning. And then finally, you've got the actual practicum design and delivery modules, which set out and then deliver on the actual practicum, which is submitted, as Renat says, as a concise body of work. So Renat, this is your module, I think.
Okay, so one of the things that we found was that the transition from undergraduate to postgraduate is sometimes characterized by the difference between a completely taught course and a course that requires research. So what we did was we developed this core module that we call professional research practice. I tend to call it ethics, law, and research. And the research elements, there's kind of 3 elements to it. The research element is about giving students these skills to be competent communicators, to understand the professional research practice for computing professionals, and both in an academic and particularly in a non-academic context to understand the issues around ethics. So this gives you an underpinning, if you like, for all the work then that you will do later on. So inside the research element, you've got qualitative and quantitative research, discussing and showing you how to access and evaluate research materials, and how to assess outcomes and how to look at dissemination. So I suppose from the point of view of just looking at it within the course, it gives the students the skills and understanding to plan and manage the practical aspects of the practicum, okay? But actually we see it in a much broader sense than that. So in other words, there's a whole section on law, IT law, and while we're not sending you out as barristers, you will understand where law is, what the current legislation is, how to find it, how to understand it, how to read it, and how to be very wary of it as well. So that'll cover GDPR and all that kind of stuff. But then in ethics, we look at the ethical issues associated with privacy, issues associated with, if you like, copyright, etc., from an ethical and not a legal point of view. So it's a broad module, but it changes every year, but we have it as core in all our master's modules.
So another introductory module is the FinTech Financial Innovation module. And as I said, this module kind of gives a broad overview of the FinTech landscape, focusing on particularly innovations in finance. One of the key innovations that it looks at is blockchain and its application areas, particularly in terms of cryptocurrencies. It also looks at crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lending, and it feeds into aspects, as well as looking at novel technologies and modalities for FinTech. It also feeds into specifics of topics such as regulation technology or red tech in the coverage of topics such as financial regulation. So in the coverage of financial regulation, it feeds into wider topics in the FinTech space, okay? And reg tech or detection of changes in regulation, that basically is one of those there. Renat, this is you again.
Okay, so this module is an interesting one. We also run in conjunction with our School of Law in DCU. We run an MA in data protection and privacy. And as part of that MA, we developed this module in data governance. So having, if you like, embedded some of the law from the earlier module, this explains and helps students to understand how to then govern data within a company given the GDPR issues, okay? And it's all about the effective management and use of IT systems, about data processing, creating structures and processes for decision makers, okay? And therefore, there's a big emphasis on the compliance, both from a technical point of view and from an organizational point of view. But then it goes beyond that and it looks at the overall data governance standards that are outside GDPR, what kind of methods have been used over the years, and what kind of tools are available. And then finally, it looks at some of the challenges for data governance, given the fact that we now have, as everyone knows, a lot of distributed data, and also how you can set up your data governance in order to improve organizational digital transformation. In other words, to completely make sure that in your move to digital transformation, you remain in a situation that you have proper governance, control, understanding of the data that you hold.
So, as I said, the module FinTech Financial Innovation introduces the whole topic of blockchain technology, looks at blockchain technology for the first time, and blockchain basics and applications develops that knowledge. It brings it up to a higher level with applications that are germane to the FinTech space. So, what we're talking about here are applications of blockchain in fintech, such as how transactions on exchanges are implemented using blockchain technology, how smart contracts are implemented using blockchain technology, and also to look at key technological weaknesses and potential attack vectors of blockchain. So also looking at the statistical data analysis, that is also an intermediate topic which serves as an underpinning of the necessary statistical knowledge from the point of view of the various different simple and complex systems that are needed to be analyzed, maybe in somebody who is working in the fintech sector. And the module emphasizes, as it says there, an intuitive understanding of these principles, because a lot of people are thrown with the idea of statistics and so on. And we believe that through a practical application of these to particular data examples, that gives a better knowledge of the actual processes that are involved, the underlying maths that are involved. And we draw these systems, these examples from, among other systems, financial systems. And the focus here, the understanding and the applicability are the focus rather than any kind of sophistication of maths there. So from the point of view of the high-tech innovation and entrepreneurship, this module basically looks at to introduce the theory and practice of entrepreneurship in the context of venture creation in fintech. And it basically sets out to give some theoretical concepts and practical tools. And these can then be used from in order to understand how IT-based innovative ideas and solutions can be transformed into different forms of value. And the emphasis, as always, as with all of these modules, is on a particular focus in the fintech space. And the module will combine lectures and practical elements that will enable students to apply skills related to, as it says, creativity, leadership, planning, and team management that are essential in any business venture. Renat, Practicum Design.
Right, so as I said, the Practicum is a research project. We think it's very important that students get some, if you like, help in designing what research they want to do, okay? So as I said, every one of our master's programs includes the Practicum, and this design element is where they start off with a rough idea, they talk to their supervisor, they improve the idea, they get it approved, etc. And then they do things like literature reviews, etc., etc. Okay? Now, one of the things that we found over the years is that the practicums really have a very broad range. They can go all the way from a theoretical practicum, which we're quite happy with, almost pure research. So we've had practicums in areas of program proving, for example, all the way to something that's really quite applied. So we had a look at some of the practicums 2 weeks ago, and one of them was for a big financial institution where a lot of the work was involved in actually cleaning the data, cleaning the millions of pieces of data in order to come up with some statistical views about what that data was telling them. But the real work was in improving the data. So that was a very applied one. Now, because of that, the student's decision as to what practicum they decide is quite open. It can be from their work background, or it can be something that they're really interested in. But in any case, they have to have a staff member who will then advise them on it. And then an approval process allows the practicum to go ahead. So it's always very interesting to see what people choose. And certainly in this area in financial technology, to be even more interesting, I think, because it is so new.
So in the final semester, students come up to 2 technical modules that give them a necessary underpinning, and those 2 modules are sort of related to each other. The first of these modules that I'll describe is on machine learning. And as it says here, the module introduces students to intelligent algorithms applied in modern computing, looking at developing the theoretical and mathematical underpinnings of these algorithms to be used in problem-solving environments. And here you can imagine a student, maybe somebody who's working in the fintech sector, using these algorithms to predict forward using a neural net or something like that. So the module helps students to understand the algorithm's properties and limitations. So it looks through all different possible, many different suitable machine learning algorithms, from the very simple to the very advanced, and looks at the properties and limitations and enables gaining experience on them. And this understanding is key to them in a day-to-day role in fintech. The second of these modules is data analytics and data mining. As Renat was describing there, you could be looking at a very difficult data set, and that difficult data set might throw up many different challenges to do with cleaning. It might have missing data, it might have false data, and so on like that. And that needs to be handled in a patient, methodical way. And data analytics and data mining is used by many fintech companies to make better business decisions, to verify or disprove existing models and theories. Why? Because there are frequently they come upon having, for instance, time series that needs to be analyzed in order to come up with plausible theories. So looking at the science of examining the raw data for the purpose of drawing conclusions about that information, for instance. And that's the data analytics side of it. And the second part is the systematic and sequential process of identifying and discovering hidden patterns in the data set. And that might come in useful in applications in fintech, such as anti-money laundering and know your customer, for instance, where you're looking for a very small set of anomalous transactions. So this is known as knowledge discovery in databases, and is you can see why it's a very important topic in the fintech space. So finally, the practicum development module, Renat.
Okay, so we've spoken about the practicum design element, where you effectively get set up, do your literature review, get approval, work on it in its initial stages. And then what you want to do is continue that work with your supervisor until you end up completing the research, okay? As I said earlier on, the focus will be on whatever particular area of fintech is of interest or relevance, we know that. But the nice thing is that you, at this stage, will have completed all your taught modules. So, as Martin alluded to, you could use machine learning algorithms, you could use data mining algorithms, you could decide to go back and look at governance and say, well, actually, you know, I'd like to come up with a new version of governance or an applied version of governance, etc. So all of that can be used to now complete your practicum. And at the end, really, you should have demonstrated your expertise in this fintech field, both to yourselves, to your employer, to the wider fintech community. And like I said, It will not end up being a thesis that is, as some people would say, once written and seldom read. Instead, it'll be a paper, which in many cases, this year, for example, there'll be a number of those papers will be publishable and published. But that paper will then be presented by you at the end, and in a, as they call it, a viva voce. So a live presentation in which you will then have to answer questions about the paper. And those questions obviously will be put to you by the academics in the School of Computing. So it's a really well developed approach to creating research within a master's program. And it's one which is tough, but it's one which at the end of it, certainly you will have learned a lot about doing research on your own, about doing research in collaboration, and about presenting and, if you like, getting involved in that academic space as well.
So more information you can see on the screen there. The overall MCM chair is Renat Fabruri, or I would be happy to give you information about the actual degree. And so the closing date for applications is the 30th of September 2020. So it's coming up in just over a week or so. So